The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads! Wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and they truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Also, make sure to check out the new Dr. Dish Home Machine, which is perfect for these crazy times when gyms and schools are closed. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Gannon Baker, and you're listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
Hey Hoopheads, we all hate ankle sprains, and they happen way too often. Ankle injuries are the #1 sports-related injury. Arise is trying to change that. With the iFast, your athletes get preventative protection and full mobility. Athletes no longer need to wear bulky braces that limit performance and give mediocre protection. Anyone playing sports should be using these products. Keep your athletes in the game. Don't wait for them to get hurt to take action. Visit www.arise.com, spelled A-R-Y-S-E, and use the code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off the future of performance. That's ARYSE.com with promo code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off.
Well, you better love the game, and you better be a self-motivated player that loves the game, because if you're the kind of guy that needs a personal trainer to put you through drills, and if you're a guy that, isn't in love with just getting on the gun and shooting, then, the Division III level is going to be hard for you, because there is a lot of alone time in the gym.
Travis Schwab is entering his 6th year as the head men's basketball coach at Muskingum University. Schwab coached Marcus Dempsey, who was named the Academic All-American of the Year for Division III men's basketball during the 2019-2020 season. Dempsey was also a 2-time Academic All-American. He was named to the first team in 2019-2020 and to the third team during the 2017-2018 season. Schwab arrived at Muskingum after a highly successful 8-year tenure at Wittenberg University. Prior to Wittenberg, Schwab was an assistant men's basketball coach at Kenyon College during the 2006-2007 campaign. He helped lead the Lords to double-digit wins for the first time in more than a decade and developed multiple student athletes who were recognized with All-NCAC honors. Schwab started his collegiate coaching career at Heidelberg University as a graduate assistant coach from 2004 to 2006. Schwab, a 2004 Ohio Wesleyan University graduate, is one of only 2 players in NCAC history to be selected first-team All-Conference 4 consecutive years during his career in the Ohio Wesleyan program. Following his senior season, Schwab was named to the prestigious National Association of Basketball Coaches All-America team. Schwab's 1,985 career points rank 2nd on the Ohio Wesleyan career scoring list and 3rd on the NCAC's all-time list. He also holds the NCAC tournament record for most points in a game, with 40 against Worcester in the 2004 semifinals. Don't miss our free Hoopheads Pod webinar series on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. If you miss a live webinar, you can buy lifetime access to any of our previous webinars for $4.99 on the Hoopheads Pod website. If you're focused on improving your coaching and your team, we've got you covered. Visit hoopheadspod.com/webinars to get registered. Make sure you check out our new Hoopheads Pod network of shows, including Thrive with Trevor Huffman, Beyond the Ball, the CoachMaze.com podcast, Players Court, Bleachers and Boards, and our team-focused NBA podcasts, Cavaliers Central, Grizz and Grind, Nuck If You Buck, the 305 Culture Miami Heat podcast, and coming soon, Blazing the Path. We're looking for more NBA podcasters interested in hosting their own show, centered on a particular team. shoot an email to info@hoopheadspod.com if you're interested in learning more and bringing your talent to our network. Grab your notebook and take some notes as you listen to this episode with Travis Schwab, head men's basketball coach at Muskingum University in New Concord, Ohio. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, but I am pleased to be joined by Travis Schwab, head men's basketball coach at Muskingum University. Travis, welcome to the Hoopheads pod.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to chatting with you, and hopefully we'll have a really good, informative talk tonight.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be able to get you on, dive into the things that you've been able to do in your coaching career. Want to start out by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell us a little bit about your first experiences with the game of basketball. What made you fall in love with it?
I fell in love with the game of basketball because my dad loved basketball. And probably like a lot of coaches out there, my dad was my first coach. And I remember being in elementary school and always looking forward to basketball season because it seemed like he was always a little bit more juiced up for basketball season. So, you know, neither of my parents pushed me either way in any sport. They wanted me to find what I was passionate about, and clearly basketball was it. So, when I think back to getting started in this game, so much of it goes back to my father.
What was it about basketball and what was it about your dad that made basketball be the sport as opposed to something else? Because I'm sure you were a kid that probably played multiple things. What was it about basketball that stood out to you?
The thing I fell in love with basketball was it was the one sport that I could work on absolutely by myself in my driveway. And, we had a hoop growing up right there. And, I just loved to be out there. And I didn't need anyone to throw me any pitches. I didn't need, anyone to catch a pass like a quarterback. I could just go out in my driveway and be just myself, the ball, and the basket, and daydream. And, I can honestly say in my mind, I've scored 100 points in every ACC gym in America. But, and that's how I worked on my game growing up is, playing little games in my mind. And, it was just something that I liked that alone time. I appreciated that alone time. I was passionate about trying to get better. And, I remember my dad telling me that, this is the one sport that you can work on absolutely by yourself. And, I fell in love with that early on, just being out in the driveway shooting.
Who did you pretend to be or who did you pretend you were playing against when you were in your driveway games?
Oh, I was, it was kind of the flavor of the month, whoever I really liked. I'd play for Coach Krzyzewski at Duke in my mind one day, then I'd play for Dean Smith at North Carolina the next. Clemson, Virginia, I was on them all in my mind. So I still to this day don't necessarily have a favorite team. I just really enjoy watching basketball, and that even started at a young age. Never really had a favorite team, just always looked forward to whatever game was on ESPN.
When did you start to take the game more seriously, and from a standpoint of, at first it's just fun to be out there by yourself and playing these mental games in your head and you just know that you love the game? When did it start to become something that you really wanted to focus on and you started to say, I really want to get better at this because I want to have some long-term success as a player in the game? When did that turn for you? Do you remember a specific moment or maybe a year, a grade where it really turned for you?
It really, really turned for me when between my 8th grade and freshman year of high school, I set a goal for myself. I grew up in Medina, Ohio, went to Medina High School, and Keith Soy was the varsity coach at Medina High School back then, and I had set a goal for myself. And Medina has had a very good basketball tradition, and they were really loaded when I was entering high school. But I set a goal for myself as a freshman that I wanted to play JV, and I didn't want to play freshman basketball. I wanted to work so hard that Coach Soy had to put me on the junior varsity team. And when I accomplished that goal, I realized that, one, I was growing. I was always very tall and very, slender, but I was growing. I was about probably 6'4" at that point. And I started to realize that, I could be pretty good at this game if I put in the necessary time and effort. And, it was one of those things, you achieve one goal, let's set another goal. And the next goal was to make the varsity team as a sophomore on a extremely loaded team. And I accomplished that. And then it was just, all right, let's challenge ourselves to the next goal, to the next goal, to the next goal. And, I was a relentless worker. I was not blessed with great athleticism. Still have never dunked a basketball. And but I figured out probably that 8th, 9th grade years that I could outwork people, though. And that's what I've always prided myself on.
What did that look like when you say outworked people? Describe what your method was for improving in the off season between your 8th and 9th grade year, between your 9th and 10th grade year. What did it look like for you getting better? Was that finding pickup games? Was that working out by yourself in the gym? How did you go about figuring out what your plan was going to be to try to improve so you could meet the goals that you were setting for yourself?
I would make sure that at the end of each day that I could honestly look inwardly and know that there was no one around that worked harder than me. So to answer your question, the general answer is yes. So I was going to spend more time in the gym alone. I was going to spend more time playing pickup games. I was going to be the first person to open gym and the last person to leave. And I was going to get up more shots than you were that day. And I was also going to play with a kind of a reckless abandon and play as hard as I could at all times, whether I was in the gym by myself or I was playing in an AAU game. It wouldn't matter. There was no taking it easy. When I decided to go be good at basketball, I was all in, and I really had no other interests. That I was just going to work on my game with a very singular focus, and that was to maximize my potential. I didn't know what that level was going to be back in high school, but I wanted whatever it could be, I wanted to maximize it.
And where did you figure out or find the drills or the things that you worked on when you were in the gym shooting by yourself? Did you have a specific plan? Did you have a go-to resource? Did Coach Soy provide you with, hey, here's what you should be working on? Is that something you came up with yourself? How did you go about putting together your plan for what you were going to do when you were on the court by yourself in the summertime?
Well, I knew that I was, I'm about 6'6", and so in high school, I knew I was going to be a low block player. So I, read whatever books I could find, talked to whoever I could, and Coach Soy gave me a great number of drills. There was one alumni from Medina in particular named Tom Drake, he played college basketball at Grove City College, and he was probably 10 years older than me, but he was still around Medina, and he gave me some footwork drills. He's the first person that ever taught me the mic-in drill and the reverse mic-in drill. So I would work on those and work on my post moves around the basket, and and as I got better around the basket, I remember my dad saying, if you want to be a great player, you, as a big guy, you have to be a threat to score or get fouled every time you touch the ball. He didn't say you had to score or get fouled. He said you had to be a threat to score or get fouled every time you touch the basketball. And what that meant was I had to start slowly expanding my range. It went from around the basket to the 15-foot catch and shoot jump shot, and eventually worked my way to the three line. Now, Coach Soy and eventually Coach Jody Peters never let me shoot the three, but I could. Not until I went to college was I able to shoot the three-point shot. But, I wanted to be that all-around big man that could catch the ball at the three-point line and drill a three, or shot fake and beat you to the basket, along with getting sealing you on the block and scoring with both hands in a variety of different moves. So I started around the basket, tried to perfect that. Akeem Olajuwon was always, he was the best big in the world back when I was a kid in my mind. And so I'd watch the dream shake and try to work on his footwork and his hand placement and all that. And, it just progressed out from there.
Olajuwon's a pretty good guy to emulate. Just needed to combine his athleticism, then you really have something, right?
Well, I did not have that, so I tried to have the footwork is what I wanted.
There you go. Totally understand. What's your favorite memory of high school basketball? You have one or two that stick out to you when you think back to your time at Medina?
Well, I would say a very general answer would be our senior year. Of the three varsity teams that I played on. Now, we always had good talent. But my senior year was probably the least amount of talent that we had, but we were the most together group. On and off the floor, we had tremendous team chemistry, and it ultimately equated to us winning the district tournament for the first time since like 1982 or something like that. And we beat St. Ed's, who had Jawad Williams and a bunch of other really good players in the district finals. And going to play Mansfield Senior out at the University of Toledo, Mansfield Senior beat us, but just being able to go all the way out to Toledo on the bus and experience the regional tournament, that's my probably fondest memory of that year, along with winning the conference title against Brunswick in front of a completely sold out crowd at Medina High School in what was a snow day. They usually never let us play on snow days, but it was such a big game that they knew there was no way we could not play the game that day. So we just went through, and so those two memories are the things that I still think back to my high school basketball experience at Medina and remember so fondly.
That's like a high school basketball player's dream, man. You have a snow day and you still get to play.
Absolutely.
Doesn't get
against your arch rival.
Absolutely. Doesn't get any better than that. All right. So while you're at Medina, at what point do you start to come to the realization, start to think about the opportunity to play college basketball? When does that come on your radar as a goal? Was it something that you knew from the time that you entered high school that you wanted to do? Just talk to me a little bit about when that came on your radar.
It actually came at a very young age because my father played at Grove City College, and so when I was a little kid, it could have been Duke and Grove City College were at the same level in my mind. So I may be the only player in the history of basketball that, in late elementary school and early middle school was out in my driveway working to try to earn a scholarship to Grove City College.
That's awesome.
And little did I know that they were Division III. They didn't offer athletic scholarships, but that's what I was working towards. So it was always a goal of mine to play in college because, again, I was so solely focused on basketball. I didn't really do a whole lot else as far as partying and going out chasing girls. I was a guy that wanted to be in the gym. And so I knew that maybe there was a possibility of playing in college, but I wanted to see. And so I just worked with the goal of eventually getting somewhere to play because I just thought that would be the greatest experience in the world, playing college basketball. So, at a young age, I thought I wanted to do it, but then as I got older and older and kept working, I knew it was a possibility. It was just a matter of where.
All right. So what did that recruitment look like in terms of ultimately deciding on the where and ending up at Ohio Wesleyan? Just talk about what the recruiting process was like for you, both in terms of your mindset and kind of how you were perceiving that recruiting, and then ultimately what led to your decision to go to Ohio Wesleyan.
The recruiting process was intense because, this was a time before cell phones and before texting. So the house phone would ring off the hook every single night. And, early on, you're so juiced up to be talking to college coaches. And it was such an awesome thing you want me to come play for you. That's wonderful. Eventually it wears on you, though, when the phone's constantly ringing. I would venture to say most all of the OAC and NCAC schools recruited me. Even some schools I never even heard of were calling me, and it was quite an honor. But, I enjoyed talking to the coaches. I enjoyed getting to know them. I enjoyed visiting their campuses. But I really wasn't thinking about where I wanted to go. My mom and dad would nag me all the time. You got to start thinking about college, Travis. You have to start thinking about college. Well, no, I got a season to prepare for, or we're in our season. So, I didn't really start giving it a hard look until after the season ended. And then it was like a crash course. Well, I got to go visit this place, and this place. And, it's funny that you have talked to Tom Heil at BW because, Coach Bankson was the coach at BW for a long, long time. Very, very successful coach. And Baldwin Wallace recruited the snot out of me. I think they may have been at every single game of mine my senior year. And, I built a good relationship with those guys. And I remember I was going to go play open gym in the spring with their guys as I was getting down to the kind of decision-making time, pushing May 1st. And I had told my parents, Mom, Dad, I think I'm going to go to Baldwin Wallace. And they even wrote the deposit check, but I had left it on the kitchen table when I went up to play open gym. So I was going to give it to Coach Bankson and we'd be done. And after open gym, he brought me back into his office and we were chatting, and I said, Coach Bankson, I'm 99.9% sure I'm coming to Baldwin Wallace. And he was so pumped. Yeah, I was excited. So I get in the car and I drive back to Medina, and as I'm walking in the door, the phone's ringing. And I answered it. And it was Mike DeWitt at Ohio Wesleyan, who I had built a very good relationship with, visited once. And, he talked me into coming for one more visit the following day, which was May 1st. And so my dad and I got in the car and drove down to Ohio Wesleyan and did the whole thing over again. I had already been there. I had already met their guys, but wanted to see it a second time. And something happened on that day where something really clicked. And I said, no, this is where I want to go. So needless to say, the call to Coach Bankson at BW after telling him I was 99.9% sure I was going to Baldwin Wallace was quite a difficult one. To tell him I was not going there. I was going to Ohio Wesleyan.
That's funny. I'm sure it wasn't funny to Coach Bankson at the time. I grew up going to Coach Bankson's basketball camp as a kid and spent a lot of time playing at BW, whether it pickup games or just going there and team camp and things when I was playing. And so I had a lot of respect certainly for what Coach Bankson was able to do at BW without question. So what was the adjustment like when you get to Ohio Wesleyan for you as a student, as a basketball player? What do you remember about coming in there as a freshman and the experience and how it was different from what you had experienced at Medina?
I enjoyed the college basketball environment. Having, not being in class for 7-8 hours a day gave me a lot more time to be in the gym and be in the weight room. When I went to Ohio Wesleyan and I knew, I was part of Coach Mike DeWitt's first recruiting class. So here was a young coach who, he didn't have time to recruit when his first season, which was my senior year. So he had, he didn't have great players at the time, and their record wasn't very good. but he sold me, and eventually there was 9 other freshmen that came in with us, the opportunity to really change the culture and build something. So, we only had 2 seniors on the team. We had no juniors and a couple sophomores and then 9 freshmen. So we didn't know what we didn't know. So we just worked our tails off. In fact, we go down to College of Mount St. Joe to open the season, and I scored 33 points in my first college game. I'm saying, dang, this is easy. This is easy. I didn't
Now wait, you didn't immediately transfer?
Heck no. I guess things have changed here.
You might have this year. You might have if you were growing up in 2020. You did that in your first game. You'd have been looking for a higher level immediately.
Yeah, I knew I couldn't play. Yeah, when I say I'm unathletic, I can't overemphasize that enough. Like, I'm not very athletic at all. So I knew playing at a higher level wasn't going to be for me. But that freshman year, there was many games early in the season where we started 5 freshmen, and we didn't win a whole bunch early in the season. We were 0-6, I think, going into our first conference game against Wittenberg University, and Ohio Wesleyan hadn't beat Wittenberg in something ridiculous like 56 years. And here we go. We start 5 freshmen, and by golly, we won. And we didn't know what we didn't know. So, hey, first NCAC game, we're 1-0, and coach comes in the locker room after the game and tells us it's been like 56 years, guys, since we beat them. So at that point, we knew that if we could stay together and really work, we could build something. And it was definitely a rocky road at times over my 4 years at Ohio Wesleyan. But, you look at where the program is now, and I'm very proud of the fact that I was part of his first recruiting class to really get that thing kickstarted.
Yeah, I think when you get a chance to build something and feel like you were a part of that foundation, it's something that is really exciting. And as you said, when you can look back on the program that you played on and see the success that they've been able to have, it definitely gives you a sense of pride. I know that I feel that way with Kent State, and the fact that, I played, and while we were there, we had 2 really good years while I was there. I went to the NIT twice, and then we had 2, I would say, more difficult years. And then, 10 years after I graduated in 2002, they're 1 game away from the Final Four. And if you'd have told me that the program that I played in would have been able to get to that level, I don't know that I would have believed you. But I look at the sustained run of success that Kent State's been able to have in the years since I've been gone. And it's one of those things that you can certainly look back on with pride. And it's fun to go to the games and know that you were some small, tiny little part in that program's history. And I'm sure that you feel the same way with Ohio Wesleyan, that you were kind of in on the ground floor of building something. I'm sure that is something that you take a tremendous amount of pride in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look forward to the day, taking my kids back. I've got two children now, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. They're not really old enough to appreciate anything like that. But no, Ohio Wesleyan and Ohio Wesleyan basketball holds a near and dear place in my heart. And, I just absolutely loved every single second of my experience playing hoops there.
Is there one thing that stands out besides the ones that you've already mentioned in terms of when you think back on your time there that sticks out to you as a particularly vivid memory?
Oh, there's all sorts of great memories, We had some really tough games. The league was the top of the league especially was really good, and again we were building. But probably the thing that sticks out to me the most is my senior year we had a pretty good team, and we ended up finishing 19-8. And, since Ohio Wesleyan won the national championship in 1988, there hadn't been a whole lot of success since that point. So as a senior captain, as a senior leader of that team, to take a team that the year before we arrived, they were like 4-21 or 5-20, and leave there with a 19-8 record. And to be honest with you, now that I know more about the NCAA tournament and its requirements, we were probably one win away from securing an at-large bid. The thing I take the most pride in is just how far the program came in 4 years. And obviously Coach DeWitt and, I was so lucky to play for two tremendous coaches, obviously Coach DeWitt being the head coach, but John Ellenwood, the head coach at Ashland, now he was our assistant for 3 years. And those relationships and, Coach Ellenwood teaching me what it truly meant to be a post player at the college level. And the fact that, I was used to in high school just being stronger than everyone and arm wrestling them, but he taught me angles. He taught me proper footwork. He taught me that you didn't really need post moves to be a scorer down there. You just had to do your work early and seal people. And, while God didn't bless me with athleticism, he did bless me with a huge ass. So I was really good at sealing people down on the block.
There you go. You got to take advantage of what you got. There's no doubt about that.
So I wouldn't say that there's one particular memory. It's just kind of the whole thing that I'm so prideful in and just think back to so fondly.
Yeah, that's awesome that you have such a positive experience. I think when you can do that, and it's a credit to what Coach DeWitt was able to do. And I think that when you talk to coaches like we've been able to do on the podcast, and so much of what good coaches talk about is the kind of experience that they want to provide for the players that are part of their program. And it sounds like you were able to go through your 4 years and walk away with nothing but positive memories of your experience as a student and as a basketball player at Ohio Wesleyan. And to me, that's really what it's all about. Obviously, the wins and losses are important to us as coaches, but if you could have a bunch of kids that look back on the program that you were in charge of the way you look back on your time at Ohio Wesleyan, I think anybody would be crazy to say that that's not somebody who ran a successful program. If you have an existing podcast or are looking to launch your own pod but aren't sure where to start, the team at My Podcast Manager can help. Our podcast team works behind the scenes so you can do what you do best. We'll help you launch your podcast, make it sound great, and free up your time for the more enjoyable parts of podcasting. If you're ready to put your podcast editing, production, and promotion on autopilot with a trusted team of podcasting professionals, visit mypodcastmanager.com to get started. So thinking about that and thinking about your playing career coming to an end, at what point did coaching come on your radar? Was that something that was with you from the time you were a kid and you always knew that at some point you want to get into coaching? Or was it a case of you got done playing and the game had been such a big part of your life that you looked around and said, hey, I got to figure out a way to stay in this game? How did coaching come to be part of what you thought you might want to do for your career?
Well, when I went to college, a funny story is I was out shooting in the driveway right before I was about to leave for college, and my dad called me up and said, we need to have a talk. And I said, okay. So we sat on the back of his Chevy Blazer at the time, and he said, so what are you going to major in? And I said, well, I want to coach. And ironically, every single one of my high school coaches from JV on was a high school math teacher. So I said, well, I'm going to be a high school math. I mean, I was young, naive. I didn't know. So I thought you had to be a math teacher in order to coach basketball. So I said, well, I want to be a math teacher. And he said, well, if you want to go that route, you have two options. I'm not going to pay for your school. If all you want to do is coach, you have to have a backup plan too. And so he talked me into at least minoring in business also. So I went to Ohio Wesleyan with, hey, I'm whatever he says, I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna be a math teacher because I want to coach. And that lasted about the first 50 minutes of my college career when I took calculus. And the teacher covered so much the first day, and I called my dad and said, if all my classes are this difficult, I will fail out and be home by Christmas. So there's no way I'm going to survive if they're all this hard. So after walking out of that first calculus class, I knew that math teacher was not the route I was going to go. So focused business, still had the desire to coach, had no idea how to get into it, but kind of put all that, much like my college decision, I put off all that because I had seasons to prepare for. But when it really struck me was when we lost our final game. We played the College of Worcester at Wittenberg in the conference semifinals, and it was a great game. I finished with 40 in my last game. So I was like, you start with 33, you finish with 40. It was nice bookends. That's pretty good. There's not many guys that get to say. I would bet in the history of college athletics, 73 points combined in your first game and your last game. I bet that's up there in terms of you can go across all levels. Answer to that, but I think you're right.
I'm going to have our crack research staff get on that at some point. So,
but I knew that was going to be my last game. You know, there had been some interest in possibly going overseas, but I knew walking off the floor, when it's all over. And walking off that floor, I remember feeling two things. One, it was the most helpless feeling I'd ever had in my life, because I had invested so much into the game of basketball, but I knew that I was burned out of everything it took for me to be a good player. Again, all of my success was based on outworking other people and playing harder than other people. And I was done. Even to this day, it's been 16 years almost. I still haven't lifted a weight since that day because I was so burned out on lifting. I was so burned out on being in the gym that I knew that was going to be the end of my playing career. And I knew I wanted to coach, but I had no idea how to go about getting my foot in the door. And, it's just amazing how life works out, because it wasn't probably 2 weeks after the season ended that Dwayne Sheldon, who was he was the coach at Mid Park High School when I was in high school, and Mid Park was part of the Pioneer Conference. We played him, two times a year. So I had known Coach Sheldon a little bit. Well, Coach Sheldon is now the coach at Heidelberg College, and he's at a Brunswick-Medina game recruiting, and he sits behind my dad. And they get to talking and find out who each other are. And Coach Sheldon says, hey, would Travis be interested in a graduate assistant position at Heidelberg where I'm the head coach? So Dad called me and asked me, and I said, yeah, I'd be definitely interested in talking to him. So I called Coach Sheldon, and, I kind of stumbled my way into this profession with the help of I thank Coach Sheldon every time I talk to him, because he gave me the opportunity to do what I love to do. And without him, it would have been a heck of a lot harder to try to break into this profession.
Yeah, absolutely. Dwayne and I were high school teammates, just full disclosure. So
okay.
he came out. Dwayne was a junior when I was a senior, and was, again, a great teammate, a great player, and obviously someone who's gone on to have a tremendous amount of success. And it's amazing whenever I talk to people, the amount of people that he's been able to touch as a coach, and that he's had an impact on both the players that have played for him and the people who have been a part of his staff. Again, I'm not surprised by the success that he's had. I've known him since we were in elementary school, and just a again, a great guy, a great coach, was a great teammate back in high school, and somebody that I'm not surprised at all with the amount of success that he's been able to have. So when you get that opportunity and you go to Heidelberg, what are some things that were surprising to you about coaching that maybe you didn't realize when you were playing? What stood out for you as like, man, I didn't realize coaches spent all this time doing that, or man, I didn't know that they had to do this. What were some things that were surprising to you?
Well, the first thing was the pay. The pay was so, they paid me $1,000 a year and paid for my graduate school. So I didn't get into this for the big paychecks. But the second thing was, as a player, yeah, you may put in a lot of extra time getting there early, staying late, but you have no idea how much time goes into preparing for practice, for preparing for games, obviously recruiting. And it was shocking to me, Coach, you just don't show up at 3:30 and we practice. Like, you have to spend hours in the morning planning this stuff. Like, wow. And so just the amount of time. It was difficult as a young coach that things that came easy to me didn't come easy to everyone else. And I had to really evaluate how I was going to teach things that I didn't really have to think about when I played. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how I was going to teach. And I was really fortunate because in the Heidelberg situation with Coach Sheldon, he didn't have any full-time assistant coaches. He only had 2 GAs. So there was 2 of us, both young and green. And but he threw us into the fire as if we had been coaching for years and years and gave us a ton of responsibility and, showed us how to do it, but then let us run with it. He hired good people that were hard workers, and we went with it. And so it was really a kind of a trial by fire, getting our feet wet. But I can't emphasize enough what a great leader we had to follow through the whole thing. So,
yeah, I think one of the keys, and this has kind of been a theme that's run through the podcast with guys who have started out in a similar position to you, where maybe they were on a staff that didn't have a huge number of people, and therefore they ended up having to do way more things than they might have done, let's say, had they been a GA at a Division I school, where you have a staff of 8 or 10 guys and all those responsibilities are split up. Instead, you kind of got thrown into the fire, as you said, and had to do all these things. Talk a little bit about how that benefited you moving forward in your coaching career, just being able to have your hands in all these different things early on.
I have no idea what a Division I GA does. I don't know exactly what they're responsible for, but all I know is that I got experience in every aspect of coaching basketball while at Heidelberg College. We were responsible for, as all assistants are, a vast majority of the recruiting, especially early on. So, I'll tell you what, I don't know if I've been more scared my whole life than making those first couple recruiting calls, because I had no idea what I was doing. Here I'm calling people's houses and didn't have a clue what to even say, because coach is like, well, it's like making friends. Talk to them as if you're trying to make friends. Well, okay, that doesn't help me a whole lot, but we'll run with it. But so recruiting, but also to practice planning, game planning. I don't know how many GAs necessarily have scouting reports that they're responsible for. And we were responsible for preparing the team to play in the OAC. And, here I got to do a scouting report on John Carroll, who is absolutely loaded. And I know they have so much more talent than we had back then. And how are we going to try to attack them? And so I just learned so much about not only coaching basketball, but recruiting, but also the relationship building and how it's different. Player to player relationships are totally different than player to coach. And even though I'm only 22 years old, first year out of school, I am in a kind of a mentor to these guys that may only be, 8 months younger than me. And, how you manage those relationships and still, make sure they know you're the coach and they're the player. And, but the crazy thing is, even while I was learning, not really knowing what the hell was going on, the relationships I built during those 2 years at Heidelberg with the players, many of them are just such dear friends even to this day.
Yeah, I think that's something that when you talk about coaching, and clearly we all get caught up in the wins and the losses, and those are things that are important, but it's those relationships that you can build, and we'll probably talk about that more as we go on tonight, but the relationships that you build and the friendships that you build with players, to me, that's ultimately where your success lies, when the impact that you can have as a coach is somebody that 20 years after you coach them, that you still have a relationship with them. And, they're still calling you coach because they have that much respect for that player-coach relationship. It's just such a unique profession in that way, in terms of how you can impact the players, the students, the kids that are in front of you, that are part of your team. And I wanted to ask you this because I think it's relevant, and I think about my own situation as a player. When you first got into that year of coaching at Heidelberg, was coaching, did you immediately love it? Did it immediately replace playing? How did you feel about that transition from playing to coaching in terms of your passion for the game? In other words, was coaching immediately as desirable, as exciting as playing had been, or was it something that it grew on you as you figured out more about what it was all about?
Probably not. It probably wasn't as rewarding right out of the chute as playing was, because, there's just something special about playing basketball with your team, with your best friends, and competing like crazy. It was a tough adjustment for me because I wasn't going to score any points, get any rebounds, make any assists. My job, and where I kind of focused my competitive spirit, was in the recruiting side of things. And I still to this day believe that recruiting is something that you can outwork people at. And, that had kind of been my MO as a player. And so I kind of focused all that competitive energy into my job on the recruiting side. And, if you told me you were making 10 recruiting calls a night, I was going to make 15, so on and so forth. And, you just channel it a little bit differently as a coach. But, that's part of the reason why you get into coaching, is because you are so competitive. You have that competitive fire in your gut. And so, I just redirected it and tried to apply that competitive spirit in a little bit different way.
Yeah, I think that's something that players sometimes struggle with when you have to walk away and then you go into, whether it's staying in coaching or whether you go into another profession. If you really loved to play, I think it becomes really difficult to replace it. And sometimes it's not an immediate process. Sometimes it's a growing into process where you have to get into it, where you love the grind of it and you love getting into building those relationships with players and really doing the things that make coaching, especially at the college level, so special. Was there ever a thought that, obviously this opportunity comes at Heidelberg with Coach Sheldon, did you ever think at some point that you might revisit the idea of coaching in high school, or once you were at the college level, did you say, I think this is the right level for me, this is where I want to be?
Well, much like as a player, where I'd set these intermediate goals for myself of, making the JV team, making the varsity team, playing in college, becoming an All-American. There are all these goals I set. So when I got into college coaching and really thoroughly enjoyed it, I set the goal for myself to become a Division III head coach. And I didn't know how long it would take. I didn't give myself like a time limit as, hey, I better do this in 5 years or I'll go find something else. No, it was one of those things. I'm going to work at this and see where this game takes me. But ultimately, my goal is to be a Division III head men's basketball coach in the state of Ohio. And, you think about that, there's probably maybe 30 jobs. And so they're hard to get. So I knew I had to really work hard, really hone my craft, really prove that I could recruit quality talent to hopefully someday an AD and a president would say, that's our guy. That is our guy. So, I worked at it and worked at it and worked at it. But again, it's all about goal setting with me. And I set that goal and I wanted to work to achieve it.
All right. So after you get done with Coach Sheldon at Heidelberg, you get an opportunity at Kenyon. Tell us a little bit about how that opportunity came to pass.
And that it's amazing how life works. I didn't really know Matt Croce particularly well. I knew when I was playing, he was the assistant coach at Capital. And my senior year in college, he got the Kenyon job. And so he was probably in year 4 by the time here I am yet again, done with my graduate work. There's no full-time job at Heidelberg, so I was looking for a job anywhere. And had built a little bit of a network of coaches being out on the road recruiting and just talking to people. So Croce's former assistant was a teammate of mine at Ohio Wesleyan, and he got out of coaching. And so I knew there was an opening there. So I called him, and we struck up a conversation and really hit it off. And he offered me that opportunity to join him at Kenyon, and I jumped at it. It was, you want to talk about night and day different experiences, Heidelberg College to Kenyon College. I mean, there's probably not two less similar institutions in the state of Ohio. But, I learned so much about a lot about the game from Croce, but what I really learned at Kenyon is because of their national footprint in recruiting, they have very few Ohio kids. I learned how to recruit on a national level and where to find kids of the super high academic standards. And it was a totally different recruiting experience at Kenyon because of their timetables. The application deadline was hard and fast. If you didn't get your app in by maybe it was January, you were not coming to Kenyon. Where at Heidelberg, I mean, we could have got kids in probably the second week of class and still got them rolling. But so, putting those two remarkably different experiences together, I think even made me a more well-rounded coach, especially on the recruiting side.
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't often think about the fact or the role that the college itself plays. I think a lot of times when you're thinking about college coaching, and I probably am guilty of this as anybody, is you kind of think that, I don't want to say all jobs are the same, but there certainly are different parameters and different restrictions and different constraints that you have depending on what the institution is, where you're at in terms of their academics and just the campus and what type of school it is. And so I can imagine that it's different no matter where you are. So after you leave Kenyon, you get to another place that obviously has a rich basketball tradition in Wittenberg. So talk a little bit about that experience that you had at Wittenberg.
Wittenberg holds a place, in my heart. I spent 8 years at Wittenberg. So, I mean, I did, basically 2 full cycles of recruiting all the way through. And, Coach Brown, I had gotten to know Coach Brown. He recruited me a little bit out of high school, and obviously playing at Ohio Wesleyan, his teams would beat our butts a lot because they were so loaded. And, when I was in grad school and then even at Kenyon, I knew I wanted to network, so I started working basketball camps around the state. And again, my goal was to be a Division III head coach. So I'd call everyone who had a basketball camp and ask if I could work it. And Coach Brown said yes when I was at Heidelberg. So I had worked his camps for 3 or 4 years and really got to know him. And I looked at every basketball camp that I worked as a job interview. So I was going to work so hard. I was going to, be so involved in trying to teach the kids to try to make a positive impression on these head coaches, because you never know when you're going to need one of them. And sure enough, when Artie Taylor got the head job at Ohio Dominican, Coach Brown called me. And I know that he took a little bit of a risk, because there was a lot of Wittenberg guys out there that I'm sure wanted to be the assistant at Wittenberg. And here he goes and he hires an Ohio Wesleyan guy of all. So he took a chance on me. He taught me, arguably he taught me more about the game of basketball than anyone, maybe other than my father, because he taught me how to dribble and shoot. But Coach Brown really taught me so much on the defensive end of the court. If you know anything about Coach, his teams were always extremely good defensively. And, the terminology, the way it all fit together, I learned so much from Coach Brown. And, when you spend 8 years together, the relationship just is so deep and meaningful. And I think of Coach Brown as a second father. He was there for me when my father passed away, when I was working for him. And, he kind of served as a father when I had, questions about, things going on in my life. That's the guy that I would go to. And even to this day, I'm not afraid to say that I love Bill Brown. And I tell him that every time we talk, because he took a chance on me, but he let me be myself for 8 years. He let me coach the way I wanted to coach. He let me be an integral part in the winningest Division III basketball program in America. And he let me put my fingerprints all over that program for 8 years. And so, I met my wife at Wittenberg. So Wittenberg will always be near and dear to my heart also.
So what is one or two things that you learned during your time at Wittenberg that you took with you when you became a head coach that you feel have been integral to your success that you've been able to have to this point at Muskingum?
Emphasis on defense and rebounding. A lot of people say that they're defense and rebounding guys. Coach Brown lives it. And I used to joke with him, and I know our guys used to get so mad because for like the first week of practice, we wouldn't barely touch a basketball. We'd be down in a stance working on reach steps, working on blockouts, working on shell defense, working on, help and recover closeouts, and the list goes on and on and on. But, he taught me that you have to have an identity as a coach. And, you can't, as he used to say, play grab bag and pull this from this, this from that. You have to have a philosophy that drives you. And his was clearly, we're going to be really good on the defensive end, and we are going to out-rebound you by 10 rebounds a game. And if we do that, the offense will take care of itself. Now, when you're at Wittenberg, a lot of times you just have better players. So the offense oftentimes took care of itself, and we would just pound the ball to the block because our big guys were bigger and stronger than yours. And we'd play inside-out basketball that way. But I can promise you our big guys would get down in a stance and they would guard. And I've tried to carry a lot of that side of the ball over to Muskingum.
When you do and build your philosophy, how much of it is based upon, I think there's always a balance between learning from the coaches that you've been around and learning the things that you want to do, and then clearly everybody's philosophy and way of going about things are slightly different. So I think oftentimes you learn and see things that you say, I'd want to do it differently, or I wouldn't want to do that. So how much, when you became a head coach, how did you develop your own personal philosophy based off of the experiences that you previously had with the great head coaches that you were able to work underneath?
Well, I probably made a mistake early on of, just trying to implement the Wittenberg way. And, Muskingum is a absolutely wonderful place, and so is Wittenberg, but they're remarkably different. And so I probably made a mistake early on of trying to be too much like Bill Brown and not enough of Travis Schwab. And, it's taken me a little bit to, find – and I'm being brutally honest here. I've had a couple years where there's been a massive argument between my heart and my head, because my heart knows how I want to play, but my head didn't know if we were able to play that way. And, my heart wants to play, inside out basketball. But I've looked at my personnel the first 5 years, and we were very guard heavy. So we've played a more guard oriented offensive scheme. And, I'm more of a Bill Brown, Wittenberg type guy. So it's taken us a little bit to recruit the players to try to play that way. But, I'm tired of that argument going on between my heart and my head, and we're going to go with my heart. And I'm excited about that.
All right. So let's talk recruiting and thinking about how you identify the type of players that are going to be a good fit for your program, your style of play, your school. Tell me a little bit about how you generate your initial list of players. And then once you identify and zero in on the guys that you really want, what's the next step in the process to start to work on them to see if you can get them, and if there's a mutual interest in them coming and being a part of the Muskingum basketball program? What does the recruiting process look like for you?
I think most Division IIIs, the recruiting process starts the same way. You build a database that's it's probably bigger than most casual fans would ever imagine that it would be. If you want to bring in 5 guys, you best not just recruit 5 guys, because at the Division III level, when there's no athletic scholarships involved, you have a better chance of getting 0 of those 5 guys. So you got to build a big database. You do it through AAU, you do it through networking, you do it through camps, all those. It's not rocket science how to build a network. But then the really fun part comes, and that's the relationship building. And, I really enjoy that part of recruiting. And, here at Muskingum, we do have a niche. And, if you want, any player that wants Ohio State in their backyard, we're not the place for them. If you want, to be able to go down to, Progressive Field or the Flats right down the road from you, we're not the place for you. But if you're looking for a place where you're going to get a great education, you're going to make relationships that last a lifetime, and you're going to really get to know your professors, this is the place that those type of kids really thrive. And so as we go through the recruiting process, you get to know these kids really, really well, and you find out what's important to them. And I'm looking for guys that want to play team basketball, want to share the ball, want to have great enthusiasm for their teammates when their teammates succeed. But I'm also looking for guys that are competitive as hell and tough as nails. All right, togetherness, competitiveness, and toughness are the 3 traits that I think are going to really propel this program forward into kind of a new era. Again, I'm tired of wrestling with myself. We're moving forward the way I want to play, and it's all about togetherness, competitiveness, and toughness.
All right, so you're out on the recruiting trail, and you're looking for those 3 traits in a player. How much do you weigh the high school experience versus the AAU experience, and how much are you talking to the high school coach the AAU coach. Just talk about maybe the balance between how you weigh the two when you're evaluating a player. And then maybe even talk about, are you looking for the same things when you watch a high school game as a AAU game, or are you looking for something different depending on what setting you're seeing the player in?
Obviously, any network you can have, whether it be the high school coaches or the AAU coaches, is really beneficial in recruiting. So you got to get to know all those people. Obviously in the summer, what you're looking for is probably more offensive skill. AAU, you can find out who can really play, who can shoot off the move, which big guys can play both inside and outside basketball. You see the offensive skill is oftentimes more emphasized in the summertime in AAU. So that, you got to watch that, because obviously the game's a heck of a lot easier when the ball goes in the basket. So you need guys that can put the ball in the basket. Where you find kind of those intangible traits, I find they're easier to identify during the high school season, because you're watching these kids get coached really hard day in and day out. You're watching them play in front of packed houses. How do they handle that? Are they mentally tough to deal with an opposing crowd? Are they mentally tough to handle when the coach calls a timeout for the sole purpose of yelling at them? Are they truly committed to the most important stat, and that's winning? All right. And are they willing to turn down a good shot to get a teammate a great shot? I think you see those things a lot more in the high school season than necessarily you do in the AAU season. I like to see which kid in both is willing to, whether it be an 8 a.m. game in the summertime in July or the conference championship game in February, which kid is willing and able and wants to dive on the floor after that loose ball, sell out into the bench to save a loose ball, who's willing to, block out every time. Those are the things that are important to me. And obviously you can see different things at different times of the year, but I guess if you really want, I really like watching the high school game. I enjoy the AAU game, but I love the high school game.
When you sit down with a high school player's coach and you're having a conversation about what type of kid this player is and whether or not he'd be a good fit for what you're trying to build, what are some of the questions that you might ask a high school coach about that player when you're trying to determine whether he'd be a good fit for you?
Does he love basketball is the first question. If he loves the game, and I mean truly loves the game, that's something we can work with. So does he love the game? How are his grades? What's his family situation like? All right. And, is he willing to do, how has he handled maybe when you've asked him to maybe change his role a little bit? Because, very few freshmen come in and impact the game the way they did in high school. A lot of times that role changes, and the ones that accept the change in their role typically have more success. So, I want the coaches to be honest with me. If this is a kid that you need to beg to get in the gym, is always making excuses why he couldn't be at open gym in June because of this, and this, does he really love the game? I want guys that love the game. I want guys that love to identify the holes in their game and then spend the offseason filling them. All right. But I also want guys that understand that this is Division III basketball, and winning and losing is very important, but their education has to be the number one priority. All right. We all have a finite number of days that we can put on the uniform that represents something much bigger than ourselves. I mean, even LeBron has a finite number of days. Maybe. The difference is when his days run out, he's got $1 billion in the bank account. Our guys have to rely on their education. So, a Muskingum Muskie is a guy that understands that education is priority A, but there's no reason why basketball can't be priority 1B, all right? And then everything else falls in behind it. So if you love basketball, if you're committed to getting your education and you're willing to, do whatever it takes to help our program win, and obviously we wouldn't be recruiting you if we didn't think you had a lot of skill. So those are the guys we're looking for, and those are the guys that we are, I want to build a great relationship with, because relationships are important. In an era with social media and all this, nothing goes further than a phone call. The phone, I want to talk to these kids on the phone. I always tell them, I'm going to ask you maybe some dumb questions. My son is the world's biggest NASCAR fan. I may ask you about NASCAR, and they usually look at me like I'm crazy. But, my son will tell you every racer and how many races he's won and what number he is and, where his best finishes of this season. So I want to tell you that about me, but I want you to not be afraid to tell me crazy things about you, because ultimately you're going to pick to come play for me because you trust me, you trust my vision, and you believe our relationship is stronger than you have with any other coach.
All right, I want to come back to that relationship piece. I want to ask you a little something about the love of the game and why that's so important, especially at the Division III level. When you think about, at your level, the fact that in the off season that you can't have contact with your players on the floor and do any skill development with them at the Division III level, talk about how that love of the game translates into your guys improving from the time the season ends in the spring to when you guys reconvene back in the fall, and why that love of the game is so important in that intervening time, especially at your Division III level.
Well, you better love the game, and you better be a self-motivated player that loves the game, because if you're the kind of guy that needs a personal trainer to put you through drills, and if you're a guy that, isn't in love with just getting on the gun and shooting, then, the Division III level is going to be hard for you, because there is a lot of alone time in the gym, because by NCAA rules, I'm not allowed to be in there working you out until October 15th. All right, once the season ends. So, and obviously, we're going to want you to improve. We'll help give you some direction, but you need to be a self-starter and really love the game to go in there when no one's watching, and really sweat. And, even to this day, I could go in there and just shoot around and make a whole bunch of shots, but are you willing to put in the work when I'm not in there with you, when none of my staff is in there pushing you? Are you going to push yourself at game speed, game intensity? And if you don't love the game enough to do that in the off season, then, I don't know if this is really going to be for you, because you've got to be a self-starter at this level, because there's not, you come from high school, there's 4-person workouts all year long. Then the freshmen come to our level, they say, well, when do the 4-person workout starts? Well, October 15th, when the whole team workouts start. So it's an adjustment. But if you love the game and you love to be in the gym, this Division III level is a wonderful place. And the Division III level doesn't get the credit it deserves. It's a really good basketball, especially in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's one of the things that we've tried to get across to people in the course of this podcast, is just how good the level of play is at Division III. And I think if you went out and you did a survey of high school basketball players and high school basketball parents, especially those who are maybe not familiar with a lot of the recruiting process and just what it's all about, I think there would be a huge misperception of how good you have to be to play college basketball. I tell this to people all the time, that, look, you have no understanding whatsoever of how good you have to be on a roster of a Division III college, especially like you said here in the state of Ohio. And I just think the average high school player and their parents has no understanding or no concept of what that level of basketball is all about. And one of the other things that's surprising to me is that I've had a couple different coaches on that have said that they've been recruiting players who are kind of in between the Division III and maybe the Division II level, and trying to make a decision about where they're going to go. And in the course of their conversations with these recruits, they said, well, have you gone and watched a Division III game? Have you gone and seen what the level of play is like? And they're always stunned by the number of players who answer that question with, I've never even been to a Division III game to see it, to see it being played. And I think if you could take a high school junior and put them out on the floor with some of your guys, you get your eyes opened really, really quickly in terms of how good the level of play is.
Well, I encourage anyone who is being recruited by any Division III school, if you have any question about the talent level, go pick any night of the winter and go see an OAC game, because the OAC is grown man basketball, and I think you will be blown away by not only how skilled everyone is, but how athletic these guys are. And there's a reason why I think the OAC is the best league in America, but because it's got really good players. So if you want to see a really fun basketball game that's really cheap to get into, go come out and see any OAC game throughout the year. I think you're going to be blown away.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I just think it's always interesting that the number of players who are, again, in the recruiting process to some degree that haven't gone out and actually seen a game to see what that level of play is. Because as you said, the level of play is super high. And then here in Ohio, clearly with the number of Division IIIs we have and the number of just colleges that play basketball here in the state of Ohio, the recruiting competition is extremely competitive to be able to get guys to come to your school and be a part of your program. And I want to talk a little bit now about what has been kind of a theme running through what you've said tonight, and that's building relationships with your players. So when you think about building the kind of culture that you want to have around your program, it's centered around those relationships, the relationships that you as a coaching staff build with your players, but it's also built on the relationship from player to player. So just talk maybe a little bit about what you do to help facilitate the relationships within your program.
Well, we clearly define what the three words that drive our culture are, and it's togetherness, competitiveness, and toughness. But we give under each of those words, we give them exactly what's expected of them as far as, togetherness. When you come out of the game, you're going to get a high five from every single person on the bench. You're going to be actively engaged whether you're in the game or not. Competitiveness, you're going to dive on the floor after loose balls. We have a very extensive list. This year has been extremely different than most, because here we're talking about togetherness in this COVID era where everyone's trying to keep our guys apart. And so we've had to be a little bit more creative in how we've done this. We've had numerous socially distanced team meetings. And, I believe that for my team this year to move forward together, we had to really look to where we all came from. And one of the things I absolutely love about coaching at Muskingum is, when I was at Wittenberg, all you had to do was look at our team picture and you'd kind of see what we had to recruit. And it was typically white, it was typically big, it was typically affluent. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we won a heck of a lot of games. We had a lot of really great students and a lot of really great players. But when I got to Muskingum, it's opened the door to a much larger percentage of the population that I can legitimately go build relationships with and recruit. And we have got guys from all walks of life. We've got suburban kids. We've got inner city kids. We've got farm kids. We've got guys raised by mom and dad, guys raised just by mom, guys raised by grandma. We got guys with sleeves of tattoos, others that mom would kill them if they got a tattoo. We've just got such a diverse group. And I've realized that for us to come together, we need to know where we've all been from. So I asked them one question, and it was amazing to see the answers that I got. And the simple question was, guys, how would you describe your hometown? That was it. And we went around the room, and guys explained, I came from inner city Akron. I wanted to get away from some of the violence. So I came here because it was a great place to get a great education, get away from that. Another guy came from Portsmouth, and he's like, I need to get away from the heroin down there along the river. We've got one guy from Pittsburgh, a very elite part of Pittsburgh, where he wanted to get out of the elite, elite arrogance that he felt like he grew up. So he came to Muskingum. And, just to hear everyone kind of describe where they came from. They still have a ton of pride in their hometowns. But, it became abundantly clear that we all have a different perspective on life. And to hear all these different perspectives really brought this team closer together. And we have a number of these type of meetings where we talk about basically anything but basketball at this point in the year, to try to encourage these guys to talk amongst one another, to build relationships. Because, when it's all said and done, and I think back to my playing career, I don't remember every game. I remember the highs of great wins. I remember the heartbreak of tough losses. But what you never forget is the dumbass stuff that happens in the locker room and the relationships that you built during your time playing. And so, to me, yes, how we close out to the basketball, how we guard a ball screen is very important. But it is not as important as the relationships that I need to build with the players and they need to build with each other. And the only way to do that is to spend time together.
So those relationships and those meetings where you're talking and sharing questions and just getting to know each other better, are those things that you continue through the season, whether it's maybe just 5 minutes at the end of a film session, maybe it's something that you set aside purposefully just to do that and to build those relationships? Or is that something that has just come about maybe as a result of the pandemic that you're thinking about instituting moving forward? Just talk to me a little bit about how you incorporate that throughout the course of the year and not just now during the preseason. Is that something that you've thought about or done before?
Well, I've spent this summer really evaluating how I go about doing things and, basically doing a self reflection on everything in this program. And I came to the realization that I really spend entirely too much time focusing on the next opponent and not enough time focusing on our team and what we do. So I'm committed this year to spending more time individually with the guys and really not that the relationships were put on the back burner. It's just, you've been involved in coaching. It's a freaking busy lifestyle, and it's easy to get totally engrossed in what you're doing. But ultimately, if you've got great relationships, you're going to win more games. And that's kind of the realization I came to this summer. So we are going to spend more time talking about things other than basketball. Obviously, we're going to spend a lot of time watching film, practicing, getting better. But whether it be 5 minutes at the end of a film session, or maybe it's a team meal off campus somewhere, or one thing I've tried to do since I got this job is take a trip each and every year to get away from campus, usually at Christmas time. We've done 2 amazing trips the last 2 years. I took the guys down to North Carolina for a Christmas tournament 2 years ago and called in some favors, and Coach Krzyzewski let us practice on Cameron Indoor Stadium for 2 full hours while we were down there.
That's awesome.
Unbelievable experience, and the guys taking pictures and, getting to go in the locker room and see Zion Williamson's locker and all that. And so we did that 2 years ago, which was a great bonding experience. But then last year, I don't know what I was thinking, but I took a team full of 18 to 22-year-olds to Las Vegas for a tournament. And the guys were great. We won 2 big games out there. But, you get away from campus and you really have nothing but yourselves. Those relationships are really going to blossom through experiences like that also.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for being on the road. And when I think about my own experiences as a player and a coach, a lot of those best memories are from those road trips, just being on the bus or being in the hotel or at a team breakfast or walking into a new arena for the first time. And I think those are really, really special times. And as you said, that's really when you can spend more time together because you don't have some of those outside distractions that you might have at home. So I can definitely see where that would be tremendously valuable for you and your team to be able to get away and start to build the kinds of relationships that you need to have success, both developing them as people, but also, as you said, it helps you win. When you have a team that's connected, I think it's just easier to win games. And there may not be that direct line that you can draw from, hey, our 3-point percentage is 42%. And that means we're going to win a lot more games versus, hey, we've got great relationships, we're going to win more games. But I don't think there's any doubt that there's a connection between the two, that having a connected team results in more winning of games. I want to ask you a little bit about thinking past the pandemic when it's time to start getting back onto the floor. I want to ask you a little bit about your practice planning and how you go about day to day putting together a practice plan. What does that look like for you in terms of how much time does it take you to plan a practice? And then what does that planning methodology look like for you in terms of sitting down by yourself, putting it together, talking with your staff, and just bringing the vision of a practice out onto the court for your players?
Well, I probably spend entirely too much time planning practice because, one thing that drives me nuts is inefficiencies and wasted time. So I never want to waste time in practice. So we have a very, very detailed practice plan down to the minute. And I probably need to let that go a little bit. But typically, my Wittenberg ties, we're going to spend a good amount of time on defense. And when I say defense, it's everything from obviously ball screen defense, because God knows if you can't guard the ball screen in college basketball nowadays, you're going to really struggle. So we'll spend a good amount of time on ball screen defense, but we'll even go down to the minute details of how you move your feet, reach steps. And, we're a pack line defensive team, so we're working on being in gaps and stunting and recovering, and closeouts are of utmost importance. But obviously the guys, they'll work their tails off in that, but they want to get to offense too. But I believe that you can get a lot more out of a 3-on-3 setting. So we'll break down a lot of things. I love 3-on-3. I think 3-on-3 is great because you can get every concept of 5-on-5 that you can possibly see in the game of basketball in a 3-on-3 setting, but there's just a lot more. It's a lot more difficult to guard and to play. So we'll play a lot of 3-on-3. We try to scrimmage a little bit at the end of each practice. We try to get a bunch of shots up. And when you're in the OAC, the thing that you can't neglect is the weight room work also. So we're going to be lifting throughout the season also. So, we try to, I hate guys standing around. We're not going to have a lot of guys standing on the side. We're going to utilize our assistant coaches to the max. Anyone in my program is going to get a ton of reps. They're going to get a ton of competition, and they will be developed. But ultimately, I'm going to put you in a position to compete day in and day out, because even if you're our best player, I want guys competing with you, because it's going to make you better. It's going to make the people competing with you better. And ultimately, it's going to make our team better. So there's tons of competition and tons of repetitions in our practice. And in order to keep everyone as active as I want them to be, I got to plan practice down to the most minute detail.
All right. So what does competitiveness look like when you're setting up a practice? Are you tracking wins and losses? Are you tracking shooting percentage? Is there a consequence for losing in a drill? How do you set it up to make sure that you get the competitive scenarios that you want?
there's a winner and just like in life, there's a winner and there's a loser. And, obviously the winner reaps the rewards and the loser deals with the punishment. So, we're not, there may be a little line drill or something real quick. Or, the win could just be that you get out of the drill and go suck on some water for a few minutes while the other guys are trying to get a win. And so we always have a reward for the win, and we always have a punishment for the loss. And, when you have a really good team and you have a really competitive team, is you'll find that even in 1-on-0 drills, you'll have guys competing with themselves. Like, hey, I got 5 reps last time. I want to get 6 this time. And it's not something that you can really put words to, but when you see it and you see a guy doing that, you know it. And, those are when we say that competitiveness is a core value of our program, that's what I mean. We're obviously competing with our teammates in practice, but you're also competing with yourself on a daily basis. And, it may come to the point where you're so tired that just competing is putting one foot in front of the other as fast as you possibly can. That could be a win for that day for some of our guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that. We all know that when you get into the heart of the college basketball season, that it sometimes can feel like a grind. I'm sure it feels like a grind for coaches. I'm sure it feels like a grind for players. And as you said, sometimes just willing yourself to continue to give maximum effort is what you need. And when you get a team full of guys that can do that are competing for themselves, that are competing against their teammates, and that are competing for their teammates, then that's when you've really set up the kind of culture that can have long-term sustained success. We are getting close to, Travis, an hour and a half, believe it or not. Time is flying by. So I want to ask you one final question. And that question is, it's a two-parter. First part, what is the biggest challenge when you look forward as the coach at Muskingum? What is your biggest challenge? And then number 2, what is your biggest joy when you get out of bed in the morning? What's the one thing that you say, I cannot wait to get to work so I can do this part of the job? So your biggest challenge and your biggest joy.
The biggest challenge is being part of the best league in America. I mean, you look at your, I jokingly look at my assistants probably more often than I should and just ask them, hey guys, when's the easy part of our schedule? Because there is none. This league is so dang competitive. Every team has good players. Every team is extremely well coached. It's a blessing and a curse to be part of the OAC because there are no gimme wins. Any team can beat anyone on a given night. And so that's probably the biggest challenge, but it's also something I take a lot of pride in. This league is one that, there's a mutual respect for other OAC players. There's a mutual respect amongst OAC coaches because of the grind that this league is. So that's probably the biggest challenge. The biggest reward is I absolutely, positively love my 2.5 hours a day that I get to spend with my team in practice. I would be a college basketball coach even if there were no games because of how much I just look forward to. And this is how I was as a player too. I genuinely loved practice as a player, and I genuinely love practice as a coach. And, there's nothing better in life, in my opinion, than, you got a ball, you got a basket, and you got a group of guys willing to work their tails off. And when you get into it and you guys are sweating, they're diving on the floor, they're taking charges, they're turning down good passes for great passes, and that sense of euphoria you get just being in the gym with your guys, there's really nothing like it in life. It truly is a pleasure. It's truly a reward that I look forward to each and every day.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt that the opportunity to be in a gym with a group of guys that you care about, that you want to spend time with, whether you win or you lose. To me, there's nothing more rewarding. And then when you build the kinds of relationships that allow you 20 years down the road to get a phone call from one of them that says, "Hey, coach, I'm getting married," or "Hey, coach, I just got a new job," or "Hey, coach, I just wanted to call you up and say thanks." There's nothing more rewarding than that. And it comes from investing in those kids when they're a part of your program and really getting to know them, not just as basketball players, but as people, which is clearly something that you're doing there at Muskingum that's having an impact in a positive way on the kids that are a part of your program. Before we wrap things up, I want to give you a chance to share where people can find out more about your program, find out more how they can connect with you. So maybe share your email, social media, ways that people can reach out to you if they want to just call you up and talk some hoops, if they're interested in learning more about the Muskies program. And then I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Well, you can find everything about our program on www.fightingmuskies.com. That's our athletic men's basketball website. I'm on Twitter at Coach_Schwab, and anyone that is that wants to come out to a practice, please don't hesitate to give me a buzz, shoot me an email, send me a direct message. We welcome any and all people that are passionate about basketball coaching to come and watch practice. It's not to say that everything we do is, quote unquote, the right way, but I think we work our guys hard. We're committed to our guys, and we work really hard to try to put our guys in the absolute best position to win. And I love talking hoops. So anyone that wants to come and talk hoops, I could sit and, I have probably spent hundreds of hours, because I did work for Bill Brown, talking about ball screen defense. So I do have a passion for talking about ball screen defense. So if you want to come and talk some ball screen defense, please give me a shout.
Travis, I cannot thank you enough for taking an hour and a half out of your schedule tonight to jump on with us, talk Muskingum basketball, go through your basketball journey, and share with the coaches that are a part of our audience. It's been a pleasure getting an opportunity to know you and talk to you tonight. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.